Hey.
Hey.
Sorry, I was just finished another call 2 seconds ago. I'm gonna go get a glass of water if you don't mind. I'll be right back.
How is everybody?
Doing well, thank you. How about you?
Good. Karen and Gary are muted.
Now am I muted?
Sorry, I'm trying to finish something up.
Tell me I'm a mess. I just got out of the shower.
Karen's hair's down. Woo.
Her hair grows faster than anybody I've ever seen.
Hello, Jim.
Whoa, hey, Bob.
My roots are just growing.
Hey, Jim, I'm glad you're here because I'm reading the notes that you made for the history of house churches. So you'll be able to give it firsthand.
Well, actually, it was a staff person at that time, basically.
I'm gonna eat and then I'll jump in and you can go eat.
So, how's everyone's week been?
Confined. Good, but good.
Restricted? Gary, how are things with you?
Doing fine. Yeah, just plugging along.
You still seeing pretty much a full.
No way. I mean, like, it varies from 4 or 5 people a day to maybe as many as 15.
It's scary,
But,
so.
you know, much different than the 40 or so that we normally see.
Wow.
Wow.
Are you adjusting your office hours because of that, or are you still kind of
Yeah.
staying open?
I am, like, some days I might not have anybody till 10 o'clock, you know, so
Kind of nice, isn't it, Gary?
I don't know. I'm just trying to get
He
used to
doesn't know how to act.
it. There's Mark.
All right, well, let's go ahead and just again, let's do some brief introductions just because we might be new or kind of flip-flopping. I think most everyone is still on, but let's just go around and do some introductions and just go ahead and pop in and say who you are, what house church you're with, and we won't go around because it was a little weird when I was saying, hey, let's do introductions last week, and then I just basically said your name as we went around. So just go ahead and share and just give a thumbs up or like this or a thumbs down in regard to how you're doing right now. This isn't a judgmental thing. This is just helps us all understand where we're at and helps us kind of identify those things. So I personally have had a long day. So I'm like this right now, and I'm really trying to figure out what it looks like to go to Jesus for joy and strength right now. So I'm Jason, and I serve on staff, and I'm part of Kettering Collective.
I'm Gary Palmer, Gary, Maryland, House Church Shepherds in Bellbrook, one of the elders. Yeah, I would say, Jason, I'm kind of like you. I'm just sort of, some days are good, some days struggle. So I'm still trying to navigate the whole thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Thanks, Gary.
Am I next to Gary? Are we all in the same box?
No, I think we're all like
Everybody
spattered.
moves.
Everyone's different.
I'm on my screen. I'm next to Gary, so I'm going next. My name is Mark Withers, Lois Circle House Church in right by Dayton Mall, and I've for those of you who don't know, I've been at Apex since late 2002, and then from through this. However God wired me, I'm kind of fine. It kind of feels like game on, for how I'm wired, of whatever it looks like.
Very cool. Thanks, man.
I'm Karen. I am Great Commission House Church. I would say I'm kind of in the middle, slightly up, like 3/4 diagonal. It just depends on the day, the hour. I just keep reminding myself to breathe and that God is still on his throne.
Very good. Thanks, Karen.
I'm Bob Thompson with House Church Rejoice in Kettering. Things are good right now. I'm actually busier now than I am when we're full bore, trying to manage the company from home and keep everybody remote up and running. So company is still working hard and going good.
Thanks, man.
I'm
Glad to
Jim,
hear that. Oh, sorry, Jim.
I'm Jim Schindler, kind of the retired guy. It's been around a long time. Right now, not in the house church, but hope to solve that problem one of these days. I've got some issues that makes it a little difficult for us to get out sometime.
Yeah, and we'll hear a little bit more from Jim. He's kind of like the grandpa to a lot of us here.
Hey, I'm thumbs up though. I think it's great right now in terms of just when you think about the positives of this. I mean, there's tons of negatives, but if you really kind of look at the positives, there's enormous possibilities and great time to be in the kingdom, working for the Lord and having the peace and assurance that he gives.
Amen. So I love you, Jim. Always so positive.
Well, this is Larry and Ruth Sapp, and we're part of the Forest View House Church. And I would probably say we're thumbs up. A lot of positive things going on around us. And even though our family, we have challenges, it's a time that we can spend close to the family and just be encouraging and get reacquainted.
Very cool. Thanks, Larry. Thanks, Ruth. Just a few more left of y'all.
I just jumped in, so can
Hey.
everybody hear me?
Yep.
Yeah.
Sweet. I'm Chad Christian. So myself and Matt Zeglin are co-shepherding the Twigs House Church. We're pretty central to Dayton. So Andrew and Laura Elliott were the previous leaders, and they live on Brown Street, so we're pretty close to Central Dayton. I'm not exactly sure like what we're supposed to like thumbs up or thumbs down. Like I said, I just jumped in, but
Yeah,
I mean, as far as a house church, we're doing pretty good. I mean, we're in a time of transition, so but it's really been going smoothly.
Great.
And before all this pandemic stuff started, we actually got our the house church would actually surprisingly all agreed to jump on Discord. So we've been using that for organization and video and voice and stuff during all this. So but yeah, the house church is doing pretty well as far as transition and stuff goes. we're trying different things, and people are generally excited about it. And as far as the pandemic stuff goes, I mean, we're good. Like, God's in control of all of it. I'm not worried. So
Good, man.
Yeah.
Thanks. Hey, Deb and Rennis.
Yay!
We're just doing some quick introductions, who we are, and just basically, what house church we're with, and thumbs up, thumbs down about how things are going.
All righty. I'm driving, so I'm a little
Yeah,
discombobulated.
please be safe. Don't feel like you need to have the video on. Just please be safe.
Yeah, but if I didn't have the video on, nobody could see me, and then everybody'd be disappointed.
Yeah.
Right.
I love you, Rennis.
Okay, moving right along.
All right, Tim and Jillian, you guys are getting ready to share.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Tim Vincent. This is
guys.
my wife.
Hey, Rennis.
Oh, hi, Rennis.
Hey, good to see ya.
We miss you, man.
I missed you guys too. Man, it's terrible.
Yeah.
Hey, Jim.
Hey, Rennis.
There's Jim. Hi, Jim.
Oh,
All right.
Is this Rennis's first Zoom call?
I don't know. Is
It
this your
might
first?
well be. Every Zoom call is my first one.
Oh,
No,
man.
I've been on some elder ones. Yeah.
oh man.
Sorry about that. Am I breaking the rules? Is this not how you're
No.
supposed to do it?
You're quite all right, man. You
You're all
brought
right.
a sense
Okay.
of levity and joy, so it's great. I can be a little bit stagnant sometimes.
Okay.
So yeah, we are with Triangle House Church in Northwest Dayton. I would say as a house church, we're pretty much thumbs up. We're doing pretty well. We've got a little bit of new life just from people joining and kind of like finding opportunities to serve even through the pandemic. So that's been good. I think our family, maybe a little less, maybe a little more towards the middle, just stuff going on with work and getting stir crazy with the kids at home. But overall, we're doing pretty well.
Good. Thanks. Don, what about you?
Oh, he's going to pick on me.
Just to talk to you.
My name is Dawn Shields.
Dawn.
I'm running in a house church right now. I'm a leader of the singles group. I don't know. I'm doing okay. I'm working from home, so that's a challenge. And I live alone, so I don't really see that many people except for on Zoom calls. But this is my fourth one of the day, so I guess there's a lot going on. So
Cool. Thanks. Sandlands, how are you guys doing?
I'd say in the middle, probably.
Middle.
But yes, we lead the Hills and Dales House Church for everyone else who doesn't know. But I think as a house church, we're doing well. Our Wednesday night calls have been good. Would you agree?
That's great. Thanks. Deb, how are you?
I'm good. Greg just left for Michigan to work, so I mean, work's good. Traveling is whatever. House church is okay. We have a lot of baby boomers, so we're all like, what do you do with? So there's some of that.
No.
But I mean, okay, we're going all right.
Good. All right. Well, and everyone, I don't think Rennis needs an introduction, but Rennis, if you would like to give one, you're more than free.
Hey, everybody. So good to see you guys. And this is just a really interesting time. Body of Christ about it. And so I'm excited in the midst of just crying out to the Lord. I think the Lord's really using it to draw people close to himself. And so, there's a lot of good.
That's good.
Hey, Bob.
Well,
What's up? That's
So just to kind of dive in, what we're going to do tonight is we're actually going to hear the elders. I've got just some general questions in regards to our history and where we've been and how house churches began here. Perhaps if there's any lessons that we can learn that help shape us as well as what encouragement they might have for you all tonight, especially in this season. And so I'm really here just kind of as a moderator, and feel free to ask for clarifying questions as we go through, but especially for those elders that were kind of around at the beginning, which I think most all of you all are on the call. You guys were even elders at the time. Tell us a little bit about how and why house churches started.
I'll kick it off, maybe give a framework, and then, just kind of be quiet. But I came to Apex in 2002, June of 2002. Came back from after spending a couple of years in Florida, after I had kind of retired from my business. And I had a strong passion when I came back for missions and primarily unreached people group. I had had some experiences in my life and felt like for me it was almost a justice issue. Why should we hear so often when so much of the world is never heard once? And that was a passion that I carried when I came back. I had been involved in a church in Santa Rosa Beach, Florida, which is outside of Destin, when I was there for a few years, that had just major problems with addiction and single moms. It was my first exposure to being thrown into so many needy people. But it was, God used it to open my eyes. And so when I came back, I had a strong desire to get involved where there was some young people. And through a young gal who was a waitress at First Watch, I heard about Apex. And Apex at that point was pretty much a singles group. Although they were starting to go beyond that. But she kept inviting me to come. And so I told my wife, I said, to get Shelley off my back, I'm going to have to go with her. And Apex was meeting in the Seventh-day Adventist Church at that point. And so we went, and it was almost like God spoke to me when that morning, Shelley marched us down, and we were sitting in front of this huge speaker. And so we got the full effect. And Rob Turner at the point said, well, they'll never be back. But I knew when I walked out of there that that's where God wanted us to be. And so that's kind of how I ended up at Apex. And then I found out later that Rob's grandfather had actually been the pastor that led me to the Lord when I was 12 years old.
Wow.
So it was quite an incredible God thing for me to all of a sudden be in that position. So I joined Apex. At that point, there was just 3 on staff, and each one of them a worship leader, obviously the pastor, and the youth pastor. So I joined as administrative, missions, discipleship, whatever needed to get done. And I had kind of administrative experience I had my own business. So it was just great opportunity to really get involved in something that was growing fast. And but it was through that having a little bit of a passion for the unreached, I was reading Frontiers magazine, and I saw on the back cover that they were having churches form teams to go to the 1040 window to go to unreached people group. So actually ended up flying out the frontier, sat down and talked with them about what was involved in forming a team to do that. And in the process of being there that day, they talked about house churches. They said the only way you can really minister in an unreached people group is under the radar, and so it's house church. Well, I'd never heard of a house church before, and but it really was interesting to hear them share about that. And so when I came back, and we got together as elders. I don't know if I was an elder at that point or not. I think I was, but maybe not. But I shared with that, and it just, we had always had a great desire to be a missional church. We wanted to get outside the walls and really impact our community and those around the world. So very focused, but there seemed to be just a great consensus. I remember Rennis had kind of had some experience there, and so he jumped right in and was excited about it. I think everybody was excited about it. And we thought, well, if we're going to send a team and we got to train people to be house church leaders, we got to learn about house churches. So that was kind of a period of really doing research, reading, listening to people, and then ultimately the first house church formed, and it was elders. And so from that point, we started making a list of all of the leaders we could think of in the church. And we had this mass house church training sessions. I think it was every Saturday, if I remember right. And so, a lot of us we never experienced it, or not very much, but we were pretty read up on it. And so that, in my recollection, that was kind of the seed that planted house churches. Now, a lot of elders that go back kind of to that time, so they can throw in their ideas. That's been a long time ago.
Yeah, Jim, do you remember what year that was then?
Yeah, I was around 2004. I think it was 2003 or 2004.
Okay, and then the only thing I would add, I remember that whole scenario that you laid out. But the one thing I remember so distinctly was that the Lord had directed us to get smaller because we weren't making disciples. And we knew that if we were going to make disciples, we had to get smaller. We couldn't make disciples in mass. And even the Lord Jesus, had to have a small group. And then he had a smaller group within that small group. So at that point, I'd had 15 to 20 years experience in house churches in my odyssey of following Jesus. And the reason I remember this is because we made the suggestion to let's go house churches, and we did start the house church among the elders. But what I remember about that is when you came back from Frontiers, we had already decided house church because I thought the thought that I had was, wow, that is so exciting. Frontiers is telling us this is what God is doing all around the world, and the Lord put it on our hearts to do it without knowing that that's what God was doing all around the world. So that was a distinct thought that I remember, that the Lord had directed us, and then we found out that this is what God is doing all around the world. But nevertheless, that was kind of the genesis. But we made some faulty assumptions that hurt us really badly. We made the assumptions that people really understood what we were talking about in terms of making disciples through house churches, and I think those proved to be faulty assumptions in some cases. Some house churches were were, a Bible study with a meal. There really was very little one anothering going on, bearing one another's burdens, all the one another commands of Scripture. Very little of that taking place in some house churches. Other house churches, each house church had its own flavor, and even to this day, I think that's true. But in terms of the DNA of a house church, it's not a Bible study with a meal. Never has been, never will be. And anybody can do a Bible study with a meal. So, anyways, that's my 2 cents worth. Others can weigh in.
Thanks for
This
this a
is
lot,
Gary.
Gary. Yeah, let's hear from all y'all.
So Marilyn and I probably came to Apex around 2003 or 2004. What was happening is about the time Jim Schindler and I came on as an elder. Rennis and Rob were already elders, and the church was growing rapidly, but there was no method of discipleship. There never was traditional Sunday school. Of course, Apex has never been a traditional church. So as the church was growing rapidly, we were, Rob and the elders recognized there was a need to do something to bring about discipleship. And so as we prayed, all of us kind of sensed that this is the direction God was leading. I found a summary document, Jim, that you had written back in August of 2007, and I'll just read you this paragraph because I think it gives a summary. It says, the journey begins with very minimal clarity, but a strong sense that God is calling us to take the first step in obedience. The entire journey has been a journey of obedience with little clarity except the next step. There was a strong sense of the elders that God was calling us to do a new thing, and the new thing was actually an old thing, taking us back to the book of Acts and the apostolic traditions of the early church, where there was no distinction between clergy and laity, but all were in the battle together, empowered to do the ministry. So that may give you a little sense of what the elders were feeling early on, that we felt in unity that this was the direction we needed to go. And we then went, after we started that initial house church, just to see how it would go. We also attended a couple of conferences, including Neil Cole out in California. And we, as Jim said, we began to really learn a great deal. And then I remember when we first launched 3 house churches, which within 3 months multiplied into about 10, because it was just packed with leaders. And of course, from there, it just mushroomed. But you're right, it's been a little chaotic, and we just felt led by the Spirit, and we made a lot of mistakes, but we just kept pursuing it.
Mhm.
Mark, you're muted.
So I would have been the around 2 or 3 of ever adding. B team or team, I don't know what I was, but when we went to when the mob started and realized this, whatever, there were 70, 80, 90 house churches, not pretty quick. That's when the regional elder mob came in to kind of just assign house churches to people. The biggest thing I remember that's really no different than our language now. Neil Cole and who's the other guy? Forgotten Ways. Alan Hirsch. Alan Hirsch and Neil Cole came to Apex, and what's interesting, Alan Hirsch and Mike are very good friends. And so just interesting. But in 2005, Alan Hirsch came, and Neil are 4 for the training. But one of the things, are you guys familiar with what we used to call it as DNA for the churches? Is anyone not familiar with that? So it's the dynamic nurture relationship apostolic mission. And really doing the same thing, up and out. It's really the same, because making disciples and doing it together are really, aren't 1,000 ways to do it. It's kind of relational and missional, and relates together and with the Lord. So what I feel like we kind of had a up, a down, and we're coming out, I think, super strong out of that down. And at the end of the day, the down was a little bit of a philosophical wrestling, but as we're seeing the next team lead, we're just praying about fully understood house churches and could really lead us to a place beyond what we're wanting, where our knowledge was. I think we're doing, in a way, the best we could. Didn't have any church to really to well. And then really, I think God answered those prayers very clear with Mike, kind of a lot of, we had a fashion, but we didn't have a structure. And I think, bringing Mike is on us to put a structure around our modeling, kind of back on task. I know in ours personally, we kind of defaulted to Bible study only, and we would do projects, but we weren't really truly being missional and attempting to make it 24/7, aware of where God's moving, and just being ready to just listen for a new relationship that he puts in our lives. But when a couple of the things, I felt like we've been hunting since 2005. We've probably multiplied, I guess, probably six times. And our early group, that some of you guys know, all of a sudden, if you have with 18 kids, like 7 and under, it was something wacky. But most group is now Greenhouse in Berg. And so a lot of our first house church, second, third, probably 2/3 of them are Greenhouse. And so it was and we love, if you guys know about one of the Greenhouse leader, a guy named Ryan Pelfrey. He was one of the regional elders, and they just really have stuck to that deep, or are up in and out. And but one thing that I remember early on, and I don't know how your guys' multiplications have been able to have multiplications. Sometimes they super hard. Sometimes they can hurt feelings. I don't know what you've experienced or not. But one of the times we were multiplying, and I was in not to really dig people go each time, and just kind of let people just flow wherever they feel led. And one time, our circle of closest friends kind of went together and said, "Hey, you come with us." And I was sitting in church Sunday, and I'm like, it doesn't feel right. A group of people like me, just like there was no diversity in we're all the same age, and then if you guys know Christine Bush and I were like, and we did what it looked like, so we just kind of said, no, gonna. We'll just see what God provides. And then over the next year, literally our whole house church had probably bumped up back to like 30 or 40, and we didn't know one of those people previously. And so life because of the diversity. And so my personal experience from is let God kind of allow whoever to come. I haven't been a huge fan of, sorry fan closed house churches, because it doesn't make sense to me. But I understand, and there's seasons for different places. But the one that went everybody was the same. They lasted like 6 months because I think there wasn't enough diversity to pour into each other. And I think we're diverse, and the more, just from different backgrounds and different age groups, is super healthy. Everyone can speak into each other in different ways. So if yours isn't diverse now, and you kind of understand that, and it doesn't matter, you could be the same age but still be diverse. Depends on your backgrounds. But there's one of the, I guess, I could talk for 6 hours, 15 years of hosting house church, of little things I've learned. But if you guys have any questions, I think that might be a good thing. There's four of us that have literally been from the beginning, and then anyone else obviously from their perspective. If that's okay, Jason.
Yeah, no, great. That's actually, one of my questions, and we can open it up, is just, and you shared a little bit there. I think you said it well in regards to, like, one of the things that the Lord, I think, was ironing out was, this is just my own perspective, it was like getting us down to like what we really believe about the church and how we ought to live out the church. And so there were competing philosophies between stuff that was more mega church or stuff that was more traditional church, and the Lord just over time giving freedom to people to go and, be part of and, lead those churches that are like that. Which I think is just, it's really phenomenal, like even through the hardship of just how the Lord was orchestrating that, as well as just the up in and out. I know one of my questions was just, you guys shared a little bit about your stories. What lessons would you say you've learned over the years through this process, through, rediscovering this way of doing church? We can open up after that for other questions too. But what lessons?
Jason, this is Gary. One of the things that I've learned is early on, when the elders decided to launch house churches, there was a surprisingly significant resistance of some to the idea. And there were a few people even in the band at that time who left. And their concern was that there would be all sorts of heretical teachings. And what I learned from that, and what I've seen happen over the years at Apex, is that there's always going to be resistance to something that you may feel in leadership that God is leading you. And so that's why it's so important that when you launch something, that you, as a group, listen carefully to what God is saying. And the elders spent a huge amount of time in prayer. It wasn't something we just jumped into and said, this sounds like a good idea. Once you believe in your heart that you've heard from God and this is what He desires, then you set your face in that direction. And with that, you can then move forward despite the resistance. If you don't have that clarity, then it's easy to waver. It's easy to retreat. But that's why you keep hearing the elders talk about unity. When you have unity and you hear from God, then you can move forward despite whatever might take place, resistance, disappointments, because you know that that's the direction you need to go. And for us, it seemed like the ideal model for discipleship. Because although we felt house churches would bring community, our goal from the beginning was always discipleship.
That's great. Jim, you're muted. Oh, got you now.
Yeah, I don't have my picture. There it goes. I was going to say, Gary, when he read that at the beginning, it really struck a chord with me. But I think from the very beginning, we knew, there was a group of us that knew that God had called us to do that. And I don't think we ever wavered from that calling. And I think that is evident today. Because through the years, there has been more and more clarity, but it's always come from the Lord. One of the big things I think that I learned early on, I've always been a very linear, logical person. And yet, if you limit yourself to that, you miss a lot of what God really has for you. So I think being open to hearing from the Lord and then being obedient, even though sometimes it doesn't make much sense logically, was one of the big lessons I think I've learned through the whole process.
And as we, Jim, were you done?
Yes, I'm done.
Well, and then in our journey, Jim had it on his heart that we would go to India to see how they were doing house churches in India. He had been reading Victor Chowdhury and other Indian authors who had been doing house churches for a while. And so in 2006, we sent a team of 12 Apexers to India. Well, from that trip, then that's when we met Nehemiah and that whole end of things now, which has become so much a part of certainly my life, and I believe I can speak for Apex too, what God is doing, and their vision is exactly the same as ours. And so the international mission end of it too was really a house church endeavor as the Lord directed us in all of that. So that was in 2006. And then, as we've journeyed along, honestly, the elders have, historically speaking, have never really been tremendously united about house church. We had some elders who really were big church guys and very traditional in their thinking. We had other guys who were much more on the other end of the spectrum, the house church guys. And even though we had kind of competing visions, the love and all that was always very, very real, and the esteeming one another and things like that. So we kind of, the Lord kind of directed us that big church isn't the problem and house church isn't the problem, and they can work in a symbiotic relationship, that the big church can supply resources for the house church, and the house church can do what the big church can't do, because church isn't sitting there looking at the back of somebody's head listening to a message. That's not church. And that's American church, but it's not biblical church. And it can have a role, but so the two kind of work together, the big and the small. And that was kind of our niche in the house church movement in America, because historically speaking, the house church people were very critical of the big church people, and the big church people, historically speaking, in the bigger movements, were very suspicious of the house church people for fear of, heresy and things like that. But nevertheless, we were a unique model in the fact that we embraced both big church and small church. And, but I will say, that Jason and Phil, they were more of the traditional bent. And I knew in my heart, if they could get into a situation where they could really run with that model, that they'd be very effective. And so when they left to go to University Baptist, to me, that was a great thing. It was a great thing for them, and it's proven to be fruitful, and I'm very, very thankful for that. But it's also a good thing for us, because the elders are now more united than we've ever been in terms of a singular vision, and not competing. Anyways, historically, I think that needs to be said, because that was an issue. And but we're very united now, and we really doubled down on the vision by hiring Mike, because he's all about discipleship, and that was the whole reason we did House Church in the first place. So we're very, very thankful for how the Lord has directed us, and the love that we have for one another. That's a gift from the Lord, and we very much appreciate Mike and Sally and what they bring to the table. And so I guess that's it for me.
It's great. Yeah, other questions that you guys might have. You're muted, Ruth. So just realize when you guys have questions to unmute yourself.
Yeah, as I'm listening to what you're saying, I think about the house churches that we're having today. I'm wondering, overall, as a network of house churches, how are we doing today? As you think about the growth that's been happening, what are our strengths that we have today? What are some of the weaknesses that we need to overcome? And what are we doing about, this is a loaded question, I'm sorry. What are we doing about maybe addressing some of those weaknesses?
I think it's on the front edge, getting done in circles, through the huddles, through kind of a realignment or retraining on back to the mission. I do think probably most of the churches are probably still a meal and a Bible study. And then there, I think a meal, Bible study, and discipleship and mission, outside of that circle is kind of we call it a basic goal. But I believe that there's a huge desire from one who has either stuck it out or have come because of what we say would be. I think there is a decent desire to do it well, and we're front edge of learning how to multiply discipling. And that's probably my high level guess real quick. Anyone else?
Jim?
I think there's always a tendency for any group, be it a cell group, be it a house church, to look inward. That's just our natural, that's just kind of what we do naturally. So what we have been doing, and I think Jason has been leading this with the training, is teaching our house churches, first of all, that it's about life in general. It's not about Bible studies. It's about what is God teaching you? What are the opportunities God's giving you? And so I believe as our house church leaders continue to focus on reaching outside of ourselves, and that's what the teaching's all about, I think we'll continue to make headway in that regard. But I think we have to recognize there's always that natural inclination for a group to turn inward. And I agree with Mark that I'm not a fan of closed house churches. I've seen what happens. They generally wither away. Whereas house churches that are constantly diversifying themselves, growing out, reaching out, those are the house churches, I think, that tend to thrive.
Yeah, if I can just piggyback on that, I know I'm not an elder, but I think one of the things that ties back to, whenever I listen to these type of conversations, I'm always acting like, okay, what is God saying to us in the midst of this? And as I've been listening to the responses, everything that you said, Mark, from the DNA, right, which is up in and out from the beginning, to what you just shared, Gary, of, you know, being upward, inward, and outward. I think that that's when, you know, that's when house churches thrive, is when we're always driving toward expressing all of those, you know, consistently and constantly. And you're right. I think the Bible study and meal methodology is usually very high up, you know, somewhat in, you know, but it's really in the out, right? It's in the mission that, you know, we're working in the trenches together. And the problem is just a lot of us, you know, a lot of people who've been church for a while just don't know how to do the out. It's almost like we forget how to be human with everybody else. And so I think that that's one of the things that, you know, we're continually seeing and growing. And, you know, the people who have definitely leaned into the training that we're offering, and then obviously Mike's complimenting to that and even pushing it forward into places it hasn't gone before. I really do think, like, right now, you know, not just, you know, I feel like the dust is finally settling in a lot of ways over the course of the last year. And we're seeing what's left. We're seeing what God has, you know, shaken, and seeing what the foundations are that are left. And, you know, basically everyone that's here is like, we're in this. Let's go.
Can I give some input real quick? Not necessarily a question. First of all, just my experience, we've been attending and with our house church for, man, I want to say like 4 years, a little over 4 years now. And for me, there's been a lot of things about church that have been kind of flipped upside down for me. I'm a pastor's kid, so grew up in church, had a lot of ideas that aren't quite the same anymore. But for me, you know, our house church, and right now, especially with the transition with Matt and I stepping up, you know, things are changing and progressing, which is, you know, that's good. But for me, when we first started attending our house church, I was in a pretty bad spot with, well, I could say with just God in general, but especially towards other Christians in church. And for me, I think what kept me at our house church was a few things, but one, we were very much a Bible study and a meal type of a thing, and we still kind of are. But for me at that time, that's what I needed. I needed something just constant. I needed a constant there, and another thing that really helped was, you know, with our group, I can confidently say that everybody, and no exception right now, everybody in our house church, from my observation, is the same person inside church as they are out in everyday life. And I really, really appreciate that. And,
Amen.
And for me, those are the things that meant a lot to me. And I don't know, I think moving forward with Matt and I kind of, you know, Andrew and Laura kind of passed the torch to Matt and I. And I think my goal, at least a loose interpretation, I guess, of my goal would be, I would love to be able to keep one foot in that, like something solid like that, something constant, but also, you know, not just tonight, but, you know, I've heard the term discipleship tossed around quite a bit, especially since we started taking over. And I mean, I'm interested in that, and that's definitely a goal of ours as well. And we align with pretty much, you know, I mean, you know, that was one of the main things that Andrew had us make sure we were solid on, was aligning with Apex and Apex's goals and all that kind of stuff. I would say that's kind of point one. And just a side note, I guess, something that God's really been putting, something that he's been teaching me, I think, from what I was used to, and now he's teaching me new things on what church I think should be and stuff like that. And I definitely am learning and have much to learn. But one thing that I hate to see, and I know maybe this it sounds like we've moved as a church, Apex has moved past this a bit, but there with the problems that you guys had mentioned, where some people wanted big church, some people wanted small church, some people were definitely worried about house churches and stuff. First of all, no church is really going to tell me I can't meet with fellow Christians to learn about God and worship God together. And if a church does tell me that, we're still going to meet. I mean, that's just how it is. But I think the main thing God's been kind of teaching me, though, is I hate to see that split churches up, because I've seen, we all have, I'm sure, have seen that happen quite a bit. And I think lately God's been really teaching me, like, we're the body of Christ, and the hand can't do what the foot can do. And even inside the same church, everybody has different gifts, and some people may be able to handle the large services and the large crowds better, and then other people are more focused on discipleship and small stuff. And I may be kind of a broken record for some of you, but that's just something for me that I've been learning a lot lately, that just because we have different views of what church is, doesn't mean that can't work hand in hand. So I don't know. That's pretty much all I got. Just some thoughts, I guess, on what you guys were saying.
Hey, Chad, real quick on the, I love both. I have a passion for both. I truly, and I think that's also we are right now, completely from a leadership end. But going back to, like, all our house churches, I promise you have a little different personality, and we want that. We want everyone to follow the Lord at their calling for how they're shepherd house church. And they're all going to look a little different. There might be of more intense Bible study or certain doctrines through, and then the season of, hey, let's blow this thing up and only Bible study once, and let's go meet people this month. Everyone's going to have different seasons this whole time, and and I think that healthy. I think that's a healthy view. I think we've swapped it up. I don't know, all the time. So those are good conversations. We don't want cookie cutter. We want a vision of multiple disciples, but there's no cookie cutter to that. Like the Sunday school model, overall hasn't worked very far outside of that. So
right.
But any other questions for the five elders around here and other people that have been around a while? What are your thoughts on where we are? Do you feel like we have the right pulse? What do you guys feel like is the pulse in your house church with our body presently? That you feel like if we're getting it wrong, what would you give us advice on from a leadership end to, I guess, serve better?
We're experiencing a little bit of reverb. So could somebody, I think it's only coming from Mark, where it's repeating a little bit on our end. Maybe Jason, could you say that question again? So
yep. Mark, and just so you're aware, I think everyone's experiencing it too. It might just be a connection or something, but yours is skipping a lot, so it's hard to hear what you're saying. It's dropping in and out a lot. So I think there's just a bad connection or maybe an older camera. Yeah, his question was just, again, any other questions that you guys have for the elders? How are things going in your house churches? Any way for the elders to continue to serve you guys, especially in this time?
Is that a question for us or the elders? Sorry.
Guys.
That's a question from the elders to you guys. So go ahead, Sandlins.
I was just going to say, I think in regards to our house church overall, things are going really well. People are excited about being unified as a body and moving forward. I think the people that are still within our house church are completely on board. There's, I think anyone that is not on board is no longer with our house church. And so we're moving forward. So we're really excited as leaders, and just our overall house church is really excited. So that brings, that's just encouraging to see and hear within the body, since there had been so much disunity.
I always have questions, but I do just want to just say thank you, elders. We just love you guys, and we're thankful for the long service that you've done to Apex, and like through this season especially. And I love seeing you guys on here, and just having more contact in general, I think is really helpful. And I loved seeing Mark Eilers on Instagram the other day. That was like the best. We don't see your faces as much as I would like to, at least through those mediums maybe. So cool to see you on Zoom, cool to see Mark on Instagram. And, I like the avenues that we have started to create for more of that communication and relationship. So that's really awesome. I think one of the things I've been thinking about as we've been talking has been two things. Like, one is, well, I have three things. One is membership. Like we've had a lot of those differing foundational things, and a lot of people have left that want a different model or those kinds of things. But one of the things I personally have struggled with a lot is that feeling like there's no faithfulness, like people can just up and leave whenever they feel like it doesn't work for them anymore. And I know it's so much more complicated than that, and there's no like one person I actually think that about, but it has just felt like a season of great abandonment from people that I've done church with for a long time. And I know that's not true. Like, I know that in my heart. And so I've been challenging that and making sure that it's not bitterness coming out. But I do feel like as we're establishing these missions, it's good to know that we're in it together, and we're in it together for the long haul. And when we have that established, I feel like we can do this mission longer together. So I understand the freedom of being able to send people out. I also feel like I would like to have some kind of membership, at least in our house church, so that we know who's in it together, if that makes sense. So I'm wondering what your thoughts are about that, and how that would work at Apex, or if that has changed as you guys have gone through the years of your thoughts on what church membership looks like. So yeah, help a sister out.
Yeah, this is Gary. Membership has, I believe, always been at Apex. A member of a house church, of an Apex house church, and a believer. So it's been very simple. We've not put a lot of focus on a member of Apex. I think what you have sensed is like me, there's a sense of loss when you see people that you have been a part of a body for a long time. And so you're probably still kind of struggling, like even I am, about that loss. And so again, what I said earlier is when you have a sense of where God, wants you to go, I think, Mike's big thing is really movement. Where is God moving? And when God is moving, that's where I want to be. I don't want to, and it's not that God can't move in different places. It's just that when we sense God's moving, let's follow that. And so sometimes that may mean the best way I have come to understand it is God is realigning his saints for the mission and the purpose that he has for his people. And so when we are unified in our mission, we are able to accomplish that much better. If we are at odds about all these details, then Satan has its way and seems to landlock us. So that's the best way I've come to understand it, is to say God has realigned his saints so that now we can be on the same mission together. So hopefully that might help you a little bit.
Yeah, Gary, I'll weigh in on that. That's very well said. And, if people have different ideas about membership, or ways to do it differently, we're open to ideas. Our view has been that when Jesus saves somebody, he joins them to his body. They become a member of his body, and he's only forming one body. And so we have membership, but it's membership to the body of Christ. And the thing that we've said is that you have to be in a house church. And if you're in a house church, you know who's in, who's part of the house church. And there's sharing life together if the house church is functioning properly. And you guys' house church is really functioning well in terms of sharing life together. So you know exactly what I'm talking about. And so you don't need something formal for someone to go through something to say, well, you're in, because you know who's in, because you're doing life together. And those that are on the peripheral edge, we're constantly trying to draw in. And in our house church, the Girls with Swords and the Band of Brothers, gosh, there were people that when I first met them at Apex Gathering, I just thought, wow, these people are really hurting. And it's so beautiful to see them just blossom and grow. And they've just become, I don't know if I've ever seen such radical transformations. And so they're just so much a part of everything we do in our house church. But at the beginning, they were really out there and very weird, and they've been hurt, and but we've seen this in a number of people. So I guess we're open to ideas on more of a formal type of membership, but it has to be to me. It has to be based on some verse. Give me some to make it a more formal thing. So anyways, I don't know if that helps. That's kind of where I'm coming from. It's kind of building on what Gary said. And I just tend to think, who's in your house church, and who's on the peripheral, and you were constantly trying to draw them in. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. It makes sense. I think I've always felt like, well, if we're all following Jesus, like that isn't a need, but at the same time, I feel like there is freedom and structure in that way too, like to know who is on our team and who's on a different, like, you know what I mean? I know we're all on the same team, but it's complicated.
Yeah. I think one of the things that I just thought about was, wow, that was a while ago. The last immersion, talking about family on mission, and one of the points is that you kind of go and find your team. And I think maybe the middle ground, or maybe the solution is just having kind of a conversation and just saying, if there's somebody that you're not sure, maybe they're in your house church, and you think they should be on your team, but you're not sure, then just having that hard conversation, being like, okay, I think maybe have the same mission, but I'm not sure. So, and then that kind of makes it a little more formal because you've both come to a common understanding. And I think that common understanding is kind of like the key to feeling like you're on the same team.
Yeah, Mike just encouraged us to recruit people for Triangle House Church, basically, at one point. And it was like at that very night that we gained like 4 new members, basically. So we're not feeling like we need to recruit anymore, but you know, we're always open. And so, but I think another thing that is clarifying is having a mission and having that clear, because if you have a clear mission, then you will be able to recruit people to that mission who will feel passionate about it and will want to do it together. If things are not clear that way, then I feel like it's more like, I don't know, it's hard to move. It's hard to move together, I guess.
Yeah, I think for me personally, and I'm taking off the Jason's Astro Growing Team Lead hat and putting on the hat of, you know, just a regular disciple at Apex. So just understand that there's a hat switch going on right now. I think for me, one of the lessons that I've been wrestling through and learning through, and this has been through, you know, Mike's teaching previous to him coming here, is, you know, and I think you guys alluded to it, elders, earlier, that, you know, so much of the conflict can happen when there's not a shared vision, when there's not shared values, when there aren't shared vehicles, when there's not a shared vocabulary, there's not a shared way of evaluating how things are going. And I think that that's probably what is probably coming out as I'm listening to you, Jillian, you know, whether or not you sign your name on the dotted line, as some people do, you know, church membership, right? They could sign their name on the dotted line without having those shared visions, values, vehicles, vocabulary, or evaluation, you know. Whereas you could go to the other end of the spectrum where I think sometimes, you know, maybe we've been before, where we haven't solidified our shared visions, values, vehicles, vocabulary, and valuation. And I think that's maybe the question that the Lord might be stirring in us, you know, in this conversation. And I think even over the course of the last couple of years is like, what's Apex's overarching values, vision, you know, vocabulary and such, you know, so that can guide our house churches. And then we become more specific in the expression of those things based upon the mission that we're on for those expressions. So, okay, that's Jason with his hat off, you know, or whatever. And I think that then, regardless of whether or not there's formal membership or non-formal membership, you know, what we're really after is, are we all moving in the same direction? And how do we evaluate whether or not we're moving in the same direction?
Well,
any other questions? Go ahead. Oh, we might be in conversation mode here.
Oops. I lost.
You're good, Don.
Oh, well, what I was going to say, so I was in a house church and everybody left but me, and maybe some other people that aren't even connected to house churches anymore. So I think maybe what Jillian is saying is there's some of us who don't need so much a permanent membership, but maybe for people to make a commitment now, because a lot of people feel like that if I hadn't kind of wandered into like the immersion conferences because of the singles thing, I don't think I would really have known what the heart of Apex currently was. So I constantly still like trusted in the elders and the staff because of that experience. Well, you know, I was being fed all kinds of junk from the people in my house church or from other people I knew had known for a long time. So I think maybe there's a need for a commitment of who's left and who's in the game to like stand up and make a commitment, you know? Is that what you're trying to say, Julia? I don't know. That's how I feel.
Well, I did have many feelings of like, I felt like we're getting somewhere and establishing that mission, and then several more people would leave, and it felt like the wound would reopen.
Right.
I don't feel in that same place right now.
Right.
Yeah, I'm excited about what's going forward, and I don't want to revisit. Like, I don't know. I don't want to feel like we're backpedaling every time
Right.
we get going a little bit. And I know that's not true either, but I don't know. Yeah.
Well, we've been through a lot, and the Lord has brought us through it. And so in the going through it, there's a great refining. So the Lord has been refining us. And then this COVID-19 hits, and I think Apex was in better position than any church in the greater Miami Valley to deal with this situation. And so in some ways, I feel like the Lord was going before us to prepare us, so the house churches just can, now with all this technology and everything, we can still meet even though we're not in the same house, which is really wonderful. And, but, traditional churches, they do have a formal membership and they sign the bottom line, but it never keeps people from leaving when there's issues. They
Right.
walk out all day long. I remember I was in a conference where the guy said he had 60,000 people in his church, but we haven't seen 55,000 of them in years. They were all members, but they, they weren't they weren't part of it. So I think a membership has, to me, it can't be formal. It doesn't work, but it has to be organic. We have to be doing life together. We have to be on mission together. We have to be there for one another. And those are the things, those relationships to me are the things that really can define us as a church. And but if people have I hear what you're saying too, though, Tim, about just commitment. You don't know if people are in or out. Okay, that's where, to me, keeping it real at the house church level, you got to keep it real. If we're not keeping it real, then we're wasting each other's times. We might as well just be having a Bible study that nobody really has a desire to do anything about what we're learning. We just accumulate knowledge, which is most of the Western church. Well, that's probably a broad generalization, but some. And so I think keeping it real and, asking those hard questions, to me, that's what we do. We try, when we're being really surfacey, we call it out. Man, this is a waste of time. We're just being so surfacey. What value is there in this? And so I like the keeping it real that you're talking about. I think that really is a tremendous thing about house church. And people who don't want to keep it real, guess what? They'll leave. And we don't want them to leave, and we can go after them, but we can't force them to be disciples, I don't know. Does that help or hurt?
I've asked this question before. What is the benefits of membership? What is it that makes people want to be members of one another? And the end result is community. And what we have with our house church, my house church is one, I will proclaim, is a Bible study and a meal with a social time together. But what it does is we create a family on family, mission on mission with each other that has to be defined and in a core first. Once we've got the core developed, then to bring on new programs like getting involved with other program discipleship and reaching out. If you don't have the core solidified first, those will fail. And so you got to be able to have your Bible study and your meal together so that you're growing together, you're sharing each other's pains with family and work and everything else, you're praying for each other and doing that and creating the core before you can even think about reaching out and doing discipleship outside of the house church. We are an open house church. We'll invite anybody else who wants to come in and to partake with us. And the discipleship starts there, because when people come in, there are several people who come in who are less mature in the Lord than those have been around for a while or who have been a pastor's child or whatever. So there is discipleship that goes on inside the house church with your meal and a Bible study. So I don't want to undercut that and say that's not important. But if you don't get that core developed and get strong there first, then to to reach out and then to be members of an external community. Then I think one thing that we are missing inside of Apex, and this is a great resource for right here, is joining the house churches together. Tim and Jillian and some of the other people, I don't know you, but you're part of my church, right? But the community needs to be developed through taking the house churches that are established and joining the house churches together. Let's do things together, you know, and grow that way.
Happy to meet
Jason.
you, Bob.
Thank you.
So along those lines, if it's okay, and I also want to be mindful of time, I'm probably going to end up recording and sharing the Monday nights, just because we do have the full hour plus on Thursdays. On Zoom, but on Thursdays I have a coaching call at 8. So what we'll probably need to do moving forward is probably have a different Zoom number for Monday nights versus Thursday nights. Just that way it's attached to a different account and it can keep going. Because as soon as like with Thursday nights, which doesn't matter to you guys, so I'm just processing something externally right now. Because as soon as I move over to 8 o'clock, it will shut down the meeting. But along the lines of what you're sharing, I think one of the things that's really needed right now is a regaining and a resensitivity to the house churches that are around us, so that we can feel like, because what we're talking about, I love the phrase of like being members of one another as we view this, you know, in the real life, sinew upon sinew, you know, being knitted together, as Paul says throughout Colossians. And I think that's one of the things that we as leaders need to be taking on ourselves is, how do I take the knitting needles into my own hands and help knit together the people in my community? And how do we as leaders take intentionality and knit ourselves together with one another? And so we were commissioned as the Growing and Going team to go ahead and redo the map for house church regions. And we've talked about it for a while, of instead of doing it by numbers, but by doing it by geography between North, Central, and South. And so we've gone ahead and done that. It is in the latest of the house church master list update. If you should be getting emails about that. And if you look at it now, it will tell you where you are in regards to that regionally. And hopefully I'm only sharing what I know the elders have shared with us to share. So elders, please speak into this. The dividing line, if you would, is going to be Patterson Road. I forget where that's at, but it's basically north. Anything north of that, for the most part, will be Region North. And then in between Patterson and Whip will be Region Central, and anything south of Whip is Region South. Now, what that then requires then is reestablishing regional leadership for each of those. And I know the thing that I've heard, especially from Mark Withers here on this call and others, is just like empowering you guys to step up and be that regional leadership, you know, those of you who desire to help out in that. And so if that is something that piques your interest, definitely want to encourage you with that. And Jesse's working on starting just some communication tools, rolling out another communication tool that will allow us to stay connected, both as our house churches and as these newly established regions. There's not going to be, if I remember correctly, the elders are going to be more elders at large. They're not going to really take the responsibility of being regional leaders in order to guide the vision and the direction of the network as whole, but then allow regional leadership to birth out of those relationships within those regions. Is that a correct way of saying it, elders?
They're all muted.
Mark, thumbs up, is that right? Yep, thumbs up. Okay, cool. So that's just something I want to make sure you guys are aware of. And then the questions that we're asking are really at the core of what we're going to be exploring in this training time that we have together. This is not going to be a huddle, meaning a huddle, again, is where we get down into like the heartbeat elements of how we are doing in regard to as leaders and things like that, the more self-care and personal care type things. Those are available. If you want to be in a huddle, let me know. It's really really good to do that. Sorry, I just saw Mark's message. We'll see you later, Mark. And quite all right about the echoing. So the training, though, is, I think, the space for us to wrestle through these questions. And, plainly, Mike has got some great tools for us to evaluate this. Our focus really needs to be right now on identifying house church identity and how we raise leaders into that, because multiplication happens at the rate of leadership development. And so we really want to focus on leadership development during this time, especially because there's so many new opportunities as people are rediscovering, and re-engaging. I know I was chatting with Karen Chamberlain earlier, and she might have even said this last week, but she has so many more people that are re-engaging right now because they can use Zoom. Jim Schindler and I and some others are discovering, how can we plant house churches during this time? How can people who are feeling disconnected, how can we actually create connectivity for them using this Zoom thing? So if you're interested in planning house churches through this while also being in your own house church, let us know. So we've got a tiny little team going on. We're meeting tomorrow at 4. If anyone's interested, I'll shoot you the Zoom link for that. Just let me know. We're looking for apostolic and prophetic type of leaders for that. You see Paul in Ephesians chapter 2, it's on the foundation of the apostles and prophets that the church is built. And then he goes on and he describes how the apostles and the prophets and the evangelists and the shepherds and teachers are all there for the gift of the church until she brings to complete unity. But even in Paul, as you look through his missionary journeys in Acts, there always seems to be kind of like an apostolic prophetic team who are able to establish that community and give them a vision for what's coming, and then raising up indigenous leaders. And so that's something that's available. So there's definitely some really awesome opportunities for us to begin living out this calling and taking it into the next step. I highly encourage you to stay tuned, keep plugged in through the training, because I do really think that the questions that we're wrestling through or asking tonight are the questions that we'll be attempting to answer in coming days. And then the Hugh Halter training is not April 17th. I think you all know that. But we have solidified the date for that to be May 17th. And the previous week, we'll probably do a Monday evening, a Thursday evening, and a Sunday morning. So instead of doing everything, because no one can do Zoom for all day Friday night and all day Saturday and then half day Sunday, that's just ridiculous. So instead of doing 4 sessions, we're only doing 3, and we're spreading it out through the week between Monday, Thursday, and Sunday. And then those will be recorded as well if you can't make it. And we'll be doing huddles and social spaces still. So those are my few little announcements. But hopefully that kind of gives some clarity and direction. Any questions about what I just shared? I want to be mindful of our time. All right, well, I love this opportunity. I'm really excited. There seems to be a newness going on right now that I've been at Apex for years, and I feel like we're all tasting a newness that is something else. And I think the Lord has some really amazing and awesome things that he wants to do and through us. And relationship is key. It's our love for one another, that the world knows that we're disciples. So as you guys go tonight, go in love. So Jim, would you close us in prayer, kind of as the patriarch on the call?
Lord, thank you for just the wonder of who you are, Lord. And thank you that it's in you that we live and move and have our being. And Lord, truly we are complete in you. Lord, I just, as I've heard the comments tonight, it's very evident to me that this is a group who love you, Lord, and have passion to make your name known. So I pray, God, that you would, in a special way, just, Lord, come upon us, give us just a strong sense of your presence, especially in these days, Lord. Give us eyes to see and ears to hear, Lord, because there's many who need to hear the story of Jesus. So we love you. Thank you for each one who has chimed in tonight. And I just pray that you'd bless our night and the days before us. I pray, Lord, also for this pandemic that we're in right now. I pray, God, that you would use that to draw your people back to you. And God, cause us, Lord, to recommit and to realize the urgency of our day. We love you, Lord, and give you praise in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. You all have a good night, and we'll see you next Monday.